Hello, everyone, and thanks for listening and watching the Italian American Entertainment Podcast. And I'm your host, Vince Chiarelli. And today I'll be interviewing Mark Spano, a prolific writer, filmmaker, and television producer. Over the last decade, he focused his talents and energy on his family's homeland as he wrote, directed, and produced Sicily, Land of Love and Strife, a feature-length documentary. So hello, Mark. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Good to see you, Vince. How are things in Chicago?
Oh, it's good. It's getting cold out here. It's
I'll bet it is.
yeah, it's starting. We've actually been very lucky. We don't get as bad as downtown Chicago. We're about an hour outside of Chicago, so we don't get the lake effect as bad as they do. But we haven't had really any snow this year. Last year on Halloween we got like 3 inches, and this year like just a dusting so far, so we're lucky so far.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so how I usually start this is talk, since it's about Italian Americans, of course, start with where you're located now, but where you trace your ancestry in Italy.
Well, I'm located now in rural North Carolina, but I was born in Kansas City, Missouri, not too far from where you live.
Yep.
And we had a big Sicilian American, Italian American community, most bigger than people on the East Coast generally knew. When I went to college on the East Coast, people said, there are no Italians in Kansas City. And I said, oh, yeah, there are. I grew up in an Italian neighborhood. But my family, my mother's family traces their roots back to a town in Puglia called Samacco La Catola, and the Spano side of my family traces their roots to the market Vucciaria in downtown Palermo.
Yeah.
And it's a very old market, and it's a very sort of beautiful kind of old place.
Yep. I've been there.
The stones could talk, right?
No.
All of history.
Yeah, my grandma's from there, and so we went. Last time I was there was 11 years ago, and I got to go. And it's a culture shock from over here for sure. But it's beautiful. I loved it over there. So.
Yeah, oddly enough, it feels like home. I had never been there till fairly late in life, but when I went, I said, I feel this. This feels like someplace I've been before.
I know. Yeah.
And that's kind of what inspired me. When I was there for the first time, I said to myself, I should do a film about this, because everything everybody knows about Sicily is from gangster movies, and that's just not enough. Now, they're great gangster movies. I'm not.
Yeah.
I love them, right. But that's just not enough. We had 3,000 years of history. We have 3,000 years of culture, and I wanted to tell the world about that, something about that, and to say, hey, we're a lot of things, and it's just not. Guys in Borsalino hats,
right? Yeah.
And it was probably some of the most wonderful work I've ever done in my life. I mean, I was very happy to do it, and kind of fell in love with the place and the people, and they with us. They were so good to us while we were there. It just came about, and now it is, I've traveled around. Before COVID, I was traveling around giving, showing the film for a lot of Italian American organizations, doing Q&A afterward, really meeting the communities and so forth. And I did that in the US and in Canada. We got very good reception at the Toronto Italian Film Festival.
Okay.
And now we're in distribution, and as you know, the film is available on Amazon Prime and on Amazon for the DVD and so forth. But it's just been, that has been a great experience. And then in the middle of all this, along comes COVID, and I did a short film that got some visibility, called Dreaming of Sicily. And we're pretty grateful that was chosen by the Palermo Short Film Festival as an entry.
Nice.
Now, I had a friend in Palermo who was going to go represent me during lockdown, and then they decided not even to do the film festival in any kind of public way. So we're sort of waiting to hear what they're going to do about that right now. But
gotcha.
This lockdown has been something for all of us. Especially for a performer like yourself. I mean, you guys need to be out there. You need to be seeing the people. You need to be pressing the flesh. That's what show business is about.
That's right. Yeah, it's tough. It's
that connection with people.
Yeah, it's been tough. It's we had probably one of our busiest years scheduled for our band this year, and most of it's been moved to next year if next year even happens. But a little glimmer of hope. I just got an email that said hold a date for Columbus Day weekend next year for the fest, because there's a lot of festivals during that time. So you never know. We'll see what happens. I hope things get back up and rolling, and we need the our culture, our community needs the Italian festivals. Most big cities, most states have an Italian festival, and our community loves it. So I'm sure. I don't know if North Carolina.
Yes, we do. We have. Yes, North Carolina has a pretty good lodge of Sons and Daughters of Italy. Pretty active lodge. I'm involved in it. And we have in Raleigh, we have the Italian Festival. And
that's right. I have heard of that one.
We got our fingers crossed for October that we're going to be able. We did it virtually this year.
Okay.
And it was pretty good. My short film was in it. Lots of musician friends of mine performed. And that was wonderful, but it's not as good as being out on the street, having food, having a cold drink,
Exactly. Yeah, it's not the same.
We're all there. We all want to be there.
Yeah, exactly. I know. Hopefully sooner than later. But so before we get a little deeper into being Sicilian and the films you've done, how did you actually get into filmmaking? When did that bug start? From very early on, or did it start later?
Pretty early on. When I was in high school, I was always interested in film. I'd made a couple of short films, and when I was in college, I went to work for the audiovisual department at Georgetown University in the basement of Lounger Library. And that was in 1972. And I say, I went to the audiovisual department in 1972 and I have never left. I'm still there. I'm not exactly pushing around carts with projectors at this point. But I started doing that work. I continued doing that work. With a few exceptions in my life, I've veered off into one or a few other things, but mostly my work has been film and television my entire career.
Okay, very interesting. So you're also a writer too, as well, correct?
Yes, and that was I always said I used video to support my writing habit. Yeah. And they kind of crossed over. Yeah, I write a lot of fiction, reviews, some nonfiction. I'm working on a series right now of murder mysteries that take place in Kansas City in the late 50s and early 60s, actually, in the neighborhood of downtown Kansas City that is most familiar to me. I can call it up in my mind. And I really like doing that writing. And we've certainly had a lot of time for reading and writing lately, all of us. I usually have a stack of books next to my bed that I keep trying to get to, and I've kind of winnowed that down some. Now I'm scrambling to find a new good book I want to read.
Yeah. So speaking of Kansas City, I could be wrong. I haven't finished the series yet. We're like 3 or 4 episodes in. The new Fargo. Have you seen that?
I haven't, but I
Okay.
just got news from one of my nephews that there's all this discussion of Kansas City, and I'm going to
Yeah.
go. I'm going to go dig up those Fargo episodes and
Yeah.
see telling kind of the stories. Kansas City it has its own Italian American history, that's for sure, and uh, film and television, they like the crime side. They
Right.
don't.
Right.
They're not going to look at who made the contributions to the arts or architecture or
Exactly.
food and wine or so forth. So I write about it. Why shouldn't they? Uh, but there is I keep always wanting to say there's this bigger story to tell. So we don't want to eliminate those things about ourselves, I guess. And
Sure.
I mean, you have not. You're living it. You're making the music and out there, and I'm admire that very much. That you.
Well, thank
How
you.
many generations has this gone on now in your family that you're making music?
Well, I'm sure in Sicily they were doing it for years and years and years. But my grandfather was the first, professional musician. We're from Aragona, Sicily, Agrigento area, and
I know where it is. Yes.
yeah. So he was a clarinet, saxophone player, and singer, and he started with the Franco Licausi band, and Franco Licausi wrote Vitina Crozza. So that's the claim to fame there, which is one of the bigger, well-known Sicilian songs. And so my grandfather came to Rockford in the 50s and, first of the family here. And, so I'm carrying his legacy. My dad was a drummer too, played in my grandfather's band here in Rockford. So it's, I guess 3 generations if you count my dad. And my uncle, my dad's brother, is actually the bassist in my band. So it's,
Okay, great.
yeah. So grandfather, father, uncle, and me so far. And now my son, it's great. It's not great, but it's also great at the same time. I'm sure you understand staying home, but during this staying home period, I've gotten closer to my son, teaching him, Sicilian songs and Italian music. And this morning, actually, I was going to get this microphone and my recording stuff, and on the way upstairs, he goes, "Daddy, someday, it's probably in a few more years, but I'm gonna be in your band with you and Uncle Tony and Frank." And I was like, "Well, I'm doing something right, I guess, because that's that's what I want." So hopefully, we got 4 generations at some point.
Okay, great. I
He'll keep
love
it
it.
going. Yeah. So now, did I like asking this question to everyone I interview? Some people don't, which is fine. But did you have I'm sure you had an influence for getting into writing and in film. But was there a specific Italian American or Italian influence for film or writing or documentaries that you really look up to?
Well, for film, there's no question that there's a specific Italian that when I was very young, I saw La Strada by Fellini, and it made me want to make movies. When I saw that movie, I guess, I'd probably seen it fairly young, but I saw it again as a teenager in my late teens, and I could take it pretty seriously then. I could see that this is really a way to use film that Hollywood doesn't do. We generally don't get this kind of depth in the Hollywood film. Sometimes we do, of course, but when I saw La Strada by Fellini, that changed me. It made me want. I say two people. When I saw Glass Menagerie, I wanted to be a writer. But by Tennessee Williams, I wanted to be a writer, and when I saw La Strada, I wanted to be a filmmaker, and those were 2 big influences on me, I would say. Yes,
Nice.
definitely.
Nice. So, you touched on it a little bit about, the misconceptions of Sicilians and in Sicily, unfortunately, with crime, and that's what's been highly publicized. Do you think that's the biggest contribution to why there's so many misconceptions about us Sicilians, and they look, especially at the early period of immigration, where how we were classified differently. It was Southern Italian, not Italian, and so do you think there are other reasons for these misconceptions of us, and that still hold, unfortunately, today? And was that a big influence in you and your goal for really creating, Sicily, land of love and strife?
Well, you're spot on there. Yes, it is. It was my goal. I mean, one of the things that we have to remember is, and this is going from the NAACP record, the biggest lynching in the history of the United States was of Sicilian Americans in New Orleans.
Right.
And these people were whipped into a frenzy around the death of a police chief, and 11 people were lynched, probably none of whom had anything to do with his crime. What that tells you is that we as a people can go mindless, can just lose our reason about any group, any action, any whipped up accusation that this can happen. Now, yes, there were crime among Sicilian Americans in the United States, but there has been crime among every immigrant group in the history of America. And why? That's a very interesting reason, because they were asked to come here and they were asked to work, and then they were told they were less than, and they were put down, and they were said, you got to live in a certain neighborhood, and you can't have this job or that job. You can only do certain other jobs. Well, we're not buying that. None of us are buying that. We're going to look at the promise of America, and we're going to demand that America lives up to that promise. And the fact is, in the media likes a good, juicy story. The media is interested not in the 99% of Southern Italian Americans who are part of the fabric that built this nation. And they want to point to, robbers and gangsters. And why? Because this makes an exciting story. Right. But the other stories seem kind of dull. Well, while we're on this subject, I mean, the author and wine writer Dick Rosano and I are in early development on a project about the contributions made by Italian American people to the wine industry in Napa and Sonoma in California. If it hadn't been for Italian people, there would be no wine industry. This is a global wine industry.
Right.
It's not a cartel for crime. It's a global industry that is providing a really beautiful product that's on the table of many people with their families. This isn't, they're not making Everclear.
Right.
Right. They're not making rot gut. They're making wonderful wine for people to break bread at their tables with their families. That's Italian culture come to the United States of America. The slow food movement in the United States. Who's slow food? Not America.
All right.
We are.
Right. Right.
Right. And those are the things that well, I mean, there are many others. I mean, you can look at architecture, math and science.
Oh yeah.
You know, Italy has produced a great many mathematicians and scientists, and many of them, Enrico Fermi, Marconi. These people had presences in the United States, made contributions to developing America. It's not just gelato, you know, which
Yeah,
I'm
no.
very proud of.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm glad we have it.
Me too.
But you know, we say that ice cream was invented in Paris, but actually, that the Arabs in Sicily found on the hillsides of Etna, they found ice in the summertime down in the caverns in the hillsides of Etna, and they used it to make all sorts of things. Probably what they made first was granita, if you know what that is.
Oh yeah.
It's sort of the Italian version of a slushy.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
and you know, I don't want to steal credit from anybody for these things, but neither do I want it denied. You know, I don't want it denied. I mean, we are in the mainstream of many cultures now, not just in Italy, where, you know, I have met, with the making of the film, I have met Sicilians from Canada, from New Zealand, from Australia, from different countries in Latin America, from Argentina, Brazil, Venezuela.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have this diaspora. Actually, somebody even sent me the email address of an Italian-American guy in Anchorage, Alaska. And I wanted to write him, ask him where he got his canned tomatoes. Probably had to grow them himself. But I mean, we're influenced. We've been these places. We've influenced these communities. We've changed their cultures in lots of ways. You know, I know in Rockford, I know in Kansas City, that Italian Americans have changed the food cultures of those communities.
Oh yeah, pizza's different here. You know, I lived in
bet
Florida.
it is.
Yeah, I lived in Florida for 6 years. Couldn't find a good pizza in Florida, but Rockford is Rockford's known for the pizza, and that's because it's heavily Sicilian. You know.
Yeah, and Sicilians make a different pizza. You know.
Do, yeah. Spingiuni. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that's pizza to me.
Yeah,
you know?
that is. I love.
Yeah. You know, I didn't know you put anything but anchovies on pizza until I was like 14 or 15. You know, I didn't. What do you mean putting other stuff on pizza? I thought you ate pizza on Friday. You know, you're not old enough to remember that we couldn't eat meat on Friday, right? So.
Oh yeah, no, my family still does that. So you know, one thing I wanted to ask you this too about the misconceptions about Sicilians. You know, of course, like we just discussed, a lot of it every immigrant group in this country came from, the United States and all that. But do you think some of it had to do with also our own countrymen, the Northern Italians, telling the United States, the Southerns are not?
There's no question about it.
Okay. And I always wonder why that happened. Why, Northern Italy.
Let me give you an anecdote that's very real that I'll never forget. When I first started putting out the word, when I was developing the Sicily film project, I reached out to a lot of Italian people, not only in the United States, but in Italy too. I got an email back from an Italian, a Northerner, who said to me, what are you making a film about those animals for?
Jeez.
I was stunned.
Wow.
And I wrote back to him. I said, I'm one of those animals.
Good for you.
And so that bias is still exists between the North and the South. I was on Favignana walking around with a group of people. Favignana, for those of you who don't know, is a tiny little island off of Trapani, and it's breathtakingly beautiful. And it is, among other things, it is a bird preserve. So there's all of this really incredible water and rock around this island that wouldn't be very comfortable to sleep on. Right. On the beach, but it's perfect habitat for birds. And I was going around there, and there were some folks from the north. I don't know where they were from. I think, the friend who was with me whispered to me. He said, "It's like they're in another country," and I said, "They are."
Yeah.
You know, they didn't know Sicily existed. They didn't know how it existed. And many people in Italy and in the United States did not know how the southern part of Italy existed, but it did exist. And it had a culture, many cultures, varied cultures, really. You know, Sicily was conquered again and again.
Right.
And the old guys were the bad guys, and the new guys were the good guys, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that that created this adaptation. You know, that there's this blend of cultures that's you know, I say in the film, it's not Europe, it's not Asia, it's not Africa, it's not the Middle East, but it's a little bit of all of them.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and you know, there are couscous restaurants in Sicily, in Palermo. It's Sicilian food.
Yeah. It's
well, you know.
I was in for a shock when I was there. You know, growing up, I knew we were Sicilian, and that kind of goes into my next question too. It all goes together, all these questions, but about why Sicilians are Sicilians, we're not Italians, why we're so proud to be Sicilian, and a lot of it comes from because the struggles, and we're just very proud of where we came from. But you know, like you said, I did not know growing up that the heavy Arabic, you know, influence until I went there. You know, I went to there's a place in Palermo. I can't even remember the name. There's like this whole, you know, like a museum outside where
the Calza.
Maybe it starts with an N. I can't remember it right now, but it's very Arabic. And I was looking around and thinking, like, why the heck is this here? This doesn't make any sense. And them telling me, you know, I was 18 at the time, and that's the first time I really found out that it was just this hodgepodge of everything.
And on the western part of the island, you could kind of divide. The island was divided by the Arab conquerors into three emirates, right? Mm-hmm. And the western top third of the island was primarily an Arab area, where my family's from. I think probably where your family's from.
Yep.
I have some suspicions that my family is Spanish because we're very tall, and most Sicilians aren't very tall.
Right.
You know, my grandfather Spano was 6'3". Oh, wow. You know, my dad and my uncles were all real tall. My brothers, I mean, so there's all this height, and you know, you go to Sicily, not men are generally not that tall. So I'm thinking that maybe there's some Spanish blood there.
I'm the tallest Chiarelli ever, and I'm 5'10". So
there you go. Yeah,
that tells you. Yeah.
But that western part of the island, hugely Arabic influenced, and the the Arabs actually kind of gave up the land around Etna and around Messina and so forth, because they didn't like the earthquakes in the volcano. They didn't want any part of that. Well, Messina's been crumbled to the ground,
Right.
numerous times, right?
Yeah.
And been rebuilt again and again. You can hardly blame them. Actually.
Yeah, no.
It wasn't the best place to live.
Right. Yeah. So, what do you love so far about your career, as a writer and a filmmaker?
What do I love so far? So far, I would have to say, when I was very young, I wanted to do these things. And I have been blessed and fortunate enough to be able to do them. And I love that. Mm-hmm. And I keep emailing my cameraman saying, any day now, we're going to get this COVID vaccine and we're going to go start shooting a movie. I mean, there's all this discussion of flow and being in your groove and so forth. And gosh, I'm telling this to a musician, right?
Right. Oh yeah, no.
Yeah, I mean, you guys know this, that you get into a certain, and when I'm out there making that movie, is it hard work? Yes, it's hard work. And yes, it's long hours, but there is that part of it that gets you into that mode, into that flow, and you want it, and and the ideas come, you think, oh, what am I going to do about this? But then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, from some ancient Sicilian from 3,000 years ago, the ideas kind of come out of us,
right?
And it is a very good life that I am able to do this. That I never forget that. Certainly, could my father do it? No. My father worked his whole career in a steel mill, his whole working life. And then when he retired, he was an investor, and he was retired 30 years. I mean, my father retired when I was 26 and he died when I was 56. I mean, he had a very long life. Wow. And he saved his money, he invested his money, and he was, and this is a guy that didn't finish grammar school.
Yep.
But he finished his life basically being an investor. And so it wasn't lack of intelligence. What was it? It was lack of opportunity. The best he could do was, he came back from the war. He'd already had a baby when he came back from the war. He went to work in a steel mill. It paid good. There were union jobs. That's the story of Kansas City, the story of Rockford and around there. Why are we all here? Or why did our families go there? Because there were union jobs. That's why. And they got good pay and they got benefits. And I had health insurance and I could go to Jesuit boys' school and to college. And, my grandfather couldn't have done these things. Certainly, I don't know very much about my great-grandparents, but I do know that they were in the produce business and that it was a hard row to hoe, and on both sides of the Atlantic. Yeah. And so what I have achieved is, and what any of us have achieved is that we're standing on the shoulders of others.
Yeah.
Without whom we couldn't be doing what we're doing now. Just the luxury of Saturday morning podcasts between the two of us. First of all, who could have imagined the technology?
I know. It's amazing.
And then to be solvent and coherent and engaged enough to be able to do this right now is it's wonderful.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah,
That's the part that I can't forget. That I didn't do this magically on my own.
right.
Right, boom, there's Mark, he's a filmmaker, he's a writer, boom. No, it took something, and many other people are part of that something, certainly.
No, it's amazing. All the stories, we all have similar stories. And, my grandfather, same thing, didn't finish sixth grade and took a train to northern Italy and walked across the mountains to France because there was no work. And it's just like, man, kids nowadays, they're in sixth grade, eighth grade, they're still holding their parents' hands to walk across the street. It's amazing to think. My grandmother was sent here alone on a ship at 9 years old. My mom came over from Sicily when she was 9 years old. It's amazing. And one thing, I haven't asked this to anybody else, but I wonder if in all your travels and speaking to Sicilians and Sicilian Americans, have you ever discovered many that, of course, are so proud to be Sicilian, but because they left such bad conditions, never wanted to go back? That was a thing in my family. My grandfather refused.
Actually, they didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
They didn't talk about it. And in my film and in some other books, people have talked about the whole mining situation with the Carusi kids and so forth. These were pretty bad things that they had to sign off for this child labor, for them to have money to eat.
Yeah.
This was a hard thing to do. There was famine. That people didn't want to remember that. I mean, when I'm walking the streets of Palermo, I wonder, did my grandmother know about this? Did she know? She may have seen this building or the church or whatever, but did she know as much about it as I've had the opportunity to learn? And because of my reading, because of so forth, and probably not. That the history of Sicily, the knowledge that those are things that come later. Those are when you're scrambling for your next meal, when you're not sure if you've got a roof over your head. Those move up. Right. As the priorities. There's no question. And I think that's part of, if they didn't want to return, if they didn't want to talk about it, I think that's where that came from, that they didn't want to relive bad memories. And I'm sympathetic with that. I mean, I can be very sympathetic with that.
Yeah, like my mom, I've gone back. I wasn't born there, but my mom's gone back. My grandmother, who came when she was 9, went back. They didn't have so many, deep memories at, 8, 9 years old. But my grandfather, he came here when he was 26. So, I mean, he lived it. I mean, I don't blame him. His story was always... he would go to church every day and pray to God, get me the hell out of here. I promise I'll never come back. And because
and he didn't.
And he never did. Even when I went, his wife, my grandmother, took me, and we begged him, please just come. You're fine. God's not going to think anything different. No, I'm not going back. You show me the video. I don't want to go back. And, I don't blame some of it, growing up. 6 years old during the war, and they had no shoes. They'd steal the shoes off the dead soldiers, he used to tell me, out in the fields in Sicily. And it's just, it's got to be bad memories, so you don't...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So. And we know a lot more about trauma
right, exactly,
now than we did then.
Right.
There's no reason. You don't make people repeat their traumas if they don't choose to. Let them deal with that sorrow however they know how.
Exactly.
but certainly I've seen that. Yes, I've seen it where people didn't want to, they didn't want to go back. They didn't want to think about those things. If it was all peachy,
Yeah, they
we
wouldn't have
wouldn't be
left.
here.
Yeah, they wouldn't have left. Exactly.
They wouldn't have left.
Yeah, exactly. So before we get to the end of this, the question I ask everybody on this, what is your hope specifically for the future of Italian American entertainment? And do you have a good or a bad feeling that there's others like us, musicians, film industry actors that are continuing the Italian American culture in their entertainment work?
Well, with my project, I have been networked into a huge group of incredibly talented people. How could I be anything but optimistic about that? Now, I think for those of us in show business, so to speak, the end of the pandemic would be helpful.
Right, yeah.
But I foresee that there's only going to be more really exciting stuff. I mean, people like Michaela Mussolino, people like there's a guy in Toronto that's got your last name. What's his?
Really?
Is Chiarelli. He's a Chiarelli, and he's an actor and singer. I mean, and I've met authors and musicians of every stripe, jazz players, incredible jazz players. Yeah. That's exciting, and that makes us not only very Italian, but it also makes us very American. We've knitted the fabric of the culture of this nation, and I don't want anybody to forget that. I don't want anybody to be eliminated, but I don't want our contribution to be forgotten.
Right.
And I am nothing but optimistic about the future. Now, I grant you, younger people, newer generations see themselves much more fully American. They don't see this divide, and that's good in a way. I mean, I grew up in a neighborhood where it was clear I was Italian, and the people who weren't were not Italian. That those were very clear distinctions. Did we choose that? No, I think America brought that to us.
Right.
They reminded us of who we were and where we lived and how we were supposed to live. And not all of us bought it. Right. I certainly didn't buy it. Right. The next generation, they don't have these experiences. Well, of course, we don't want them to have these experiences. The famine, the having to take the shoes from dead GIs. I mean, geez, horrible stuff. Right. I mean, no, we're glad they don't. But still, we want them to know who they are and to have at least some connection to that. Yeah. I mean, my work is always been sort of imbued with a little bit of memory, no matter what it was about. Memory of place, memory of time, that's how we evoke a feeling in film and writing. We don't have these magical evocations that musicians have.
Yeah.
You guys can evoke something a little more magically than we can. You entice us against our will, and I love that about music. Music pulls you in whether you like it or not.
Exactly. That is interesting.
That's what a great way to make a living.
Yeah. No, it's going to be interesting. unfortunately, the majority of the country, people my age nowadays, their 20s or 30s, if they're Italian, most of the time they're already fourth, fifth generation Italians, and
Oh yeah,
most of it's forgotten. They don't remember a lot of it. So, me with, my mom, my parents still being from there, I'm still whatever, one and a half generation.
You've got
It's
a
a
little
little,
closer connection.
yeah, so it's a little different, but
And
yeah,
I mean, I found this in Hamilton. I visited Hamilton in Canada, and most of them emigrated after the war to Canada,
right,
and they had much closer ties to Sicily, like your family, where my family immigrated. My mother's family early in the 20th century, and my father's family actually late in the 90s, 1890s.
wow,
The Spanish side's been here a long time,
wow, yeah,
over 100 years. Well, and the Pellegrino side just a little bit over 100 years.
wow,
Uh, uh, but yeah, it's a different thing. And they didn't have the communications that we have now,
right,
and the transportation that we have, to be able to go back and to stay in touch and to so forth. So
exactly.
yeah, it's different. You're lucky in that respect.
Yeah,
You
no, I am.
you have a little closer access to your roots.
Yeah, yeah, no, the pandemic's been making me really dig into the family tree stuff, and I've
Oh,
gone,
good.
yeah, I've gotten back to this. Before this, none of us, even my parents, really knew past our great grandparents, and now I'm back to the 1700s,
Whoa.
almost on both sides. So it's some of it I can't find. My dad's mother, so. I can only get back to her parents. For some reason, all the records are gone, and I think that has a lot to do with because she's the only one in my family that's from Palermo, and I think the war had a lot to do with that, with the bombing, and a
Yeah.
lot of things were they can't find, so I can't find anything on that side. But it's interesting, the first immigrant of the family here truly was the 50s, but I've now discovered they were coming back in the early 1900s, but they were just coming back to work. They'd
So,
work.
you
They'd
know,
work. Yeah, it's interesting.
a great many people came here and went back,
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
and they got a little bit of money, and they said, okay, we're going back to Italy, and they could manage to buy a farm or create a business or whatever with the money they brought back, and
yeah, it's interesting.
stayed in Italy.
Yep. So, well, once again, I really appreciate your time. And before we go, I know you mentioned a few things you got in the works, like the wine, the Napa Valley thing. But do you have any other books, films, documentaries you have upcoming, or how can people find out more about you? Let's leave it with
Well,
that.
I'm a real easy guy to find. MarkSpano.com. www.markspano.com is my website, and it tells what I'm doing. Like I said, Dick Rosano and I are working development on this idea for the Italian families that founded the Napa Sonoma wine industry in California. Karen LaRosa, who has been an associate of mine for a few years, that we've worked together. We're talking about Sicilian wine. These are hardship projects, having to go around the world.
Right.
Make a film about the wine.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to do it. I sacrifice.
Yeah.
I've got a couple other things. I'm working on a book right now. I'm trying to get this crime series that I've got written, this murder series I've got written about the Kansas City. I'm trying to get that sold. And so there's always something to do. I can always keep working. And even with COVID-19, I can...
That's good.
I can sit at my desk and type my little heart out.
Well, that's good. Well, I will for sure include your website link. I'll include a link to the Amazon Prime Sicily Land of Love and Strife, so people can, if they haven't watched it, watch it. I've seen it. Like I said, I watched it about a couple months ago with my wife. We really enjoyed it. So you did a great job with that, and
Thank you so much.
yeah. So hopefully everybody listening to this will go. It's still it's got to be still on Prime, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so yeah, so people can go on there and give it a watch. So once again, I really appreciate your time. I hope everybody checks you out and watches your stuff, reads your books, and hopefully we'll chat again next time.
okay, great. Looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
All right, and thank you everybody for listening and watching the Italian American Entertainment Podcast, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.